Hello and welcome to Bite My Pie. Would you like to relive the golden age of gaming, or perhaps visit it for the first time? It may not be possible to get your hands on all of those computers and consoles of old, but with the help of some special software known as an emulator, we can still recreate the past with more modern hardware. In this video we're going to look at a project that allows us to do precisely that. I'm referring of course to RetroPie. We'll go from the ground up, starting with the hardware, then running through the software setup, before diving into a few more advanced areas. Anyone new to RetroPie may simply wish to follow along from the beginning, but if this isn't your first retro rodeo, feel free to skip ahead to any of the later sections, in which case you can refer to the timestamps in the description. Hopefully by the end of the video, not only will you have built your very own retro gaming machine, but regardless of whether you're a noob, to use the technical term, or already acquainted with this fantastic collection of open source software, you'll have discovered how to get even more out of it. So if this sounds of interest to you, stick around. First then, let's talk about the hardware. In order to carry out this project, we're going to need a few things, not least of which is a computer to run the software on. RetroPie supports a few different platforms, including a desktop PC or laptop. In this video I'll be using a Raspberry Pi, specifically the Pi 4 Model B with 4GB of RAM. Assuming you're going to use a Raspberry Pi as well, you'll also need a power supply. Which type will depend on the model of your Pi. For the Pi 4 this will have a Type-C USB connector and deliver 5.1 volts and 3 amps. We'll need a HDMI cable, again the type will depend on the Pi model. The Pi 4 requires a micro HDMI to standard HDMI cable. Next you'll want either a TV or monitor. If it's the latter, preferably one with built-in speakers so as to experience that distinctive chiptune music from the games of yesteryear. Then we'll need a micro SD card. The larger the card's capacity, the more games or ROMs you'll be able to load onto it. I certainly wouldn't use anything less than 16GB, and preferably bigger than this. And unless you want to be playing all those golden oldies on a keyboard, you're also going to want a USB game controller. I'd recommend a wired controller, at least to start with until you get everything up and running. Speaking of a keyboard, that's next on the list. While it won't need to be permanently attached, we'll at least need one for some of the setup procedure. After that you'll want a case to put your Pi into. There's a vast range of cases available. If you're fortunate enough to own a 3D printer, you could even print your own. Whatever you go for, it may be a good idea to get one that has room for a fan, particularly if you're using the Pi 4, as it may run a little warm when gaming. So let's add a fan to the list as well. Another optional extra is a network cable. This is for those not planning on using the Pi's built-in Wi-Fi, in which case this would be connected to the router instead. And there we have our parts list. Okay, let's head over onto a computer and go grab RetroPie. Now you could download it from the official website, but there's actually an easier way. So we're going to visit the Raspberry Pi's website instead. It's this one, raspberrypi.org. From the home page, click on Software, and then scroll down the page to the Raspberry Pi Imager. I'm going to get the Windows version and save that to my computer. From there, go and find it in your downloads directory and then install the program. Once that's done, click on Finish to run it. If you haven't done so already, make sure that your micro SD card is connected to your computer. Then click on Choose OS. You want the section that says Emulation and Game OS, and from there select RetroPie. Choose the version that matches your Raspberry Pi. For me that's RPI 4, and then click Choose SD card. I only have the one, so I'll select that, and then click on Write. As it tells us, this procedure will wipe any existing data on the micro SD card, so if you're happy to continue, click Yes. Once that's finished, you can close the program and remove your micro SD card. Right, connect everything to your Raspberry Pi, insert the micro SD card and turn on the power. Once RetroPie has booted, the first thing we need to do is configure our game controller. I've got a third-party Xbox 360 gamepad plugged in, and you can see on the screen that RetroPie has detected it. So hold down a button on yours to start the configuration. We're going to map the functions to the relevant buttons. So I'll start with the D-pad, up, down, left and right. Then start and select button A, button B, button X and button Y. The left shoulder and the right shoulder, then the left trigger and the right trigger. For left thumb, just press the left analog stick down, and then the same on the right analog stick for right thumb. Then enter the left analog stick directions, and the same for the right analog stick. It's recommended to also use the select button as the hotkey, and when you've got to the end, press the A button to select OK. There's not a lot going on in here at the moment. In fact, unless you have a network cable plugged in, we're not even connected to the network. So let's sort that first. I'm going to press the A button on my controller to select the RetroPie configuration, and then use the D-pad to highlight Wi-Fi. Again, press the A button to select it. As the Wi-Fi country is not currently set, we need to do this first. So use the D-pad to highlight yes, and press the A button to select it. From here we're going to hop over onto our keyboard and use the cursor keys to move down to localization options, and then press the enter key. Go down to WLAN country and press enter again, and then scroll down until you find your country code. For me it's GB Britain UK, and with that set, press enter again to OK it. Press the tab key twice to highlight finish, and then press the enter key. And because we've set the Wi-Fi country, we need to perform a reboot. So press enter again to do just that. Right, we need to enter back into RetroPie's configuration, and once again select Wi-Fi. With connect to Wi-Fi network highlighted, press enter on your keyboard to select it. Use your cursor keys to highlight the name of your wireless network, and then press enter again. You need to enter your wireless key, and when it's successfully connected you should see your IP address. So press the tab key and then press enter to exit. The next thing I'm going to do is make the image fill the screen. So if your display looks like mine with black borders around the edges, head into RetroPie config. Then use your keyboard to enter into display options. From there select Underscan, and no, we don't want to enable it. Press enter to select OK, and then press the tab key twice to choose finish. And yes, we do want to reboot now. That's more like it, an edge-to-edge display. There may be times when you need to know your Raspberry Pi's IP address. The quickest way to find it is to press the A button on your controller to select the RetroPie configuration. Then use the D-pad to move down to show IP, and press the A button to select it. And there it is displayed on the screen. Press the A button again to exit out of there, and the B button to return to the main screen. Okay, time to get some games. You need to be careful when it comes to ROMs. A video game ROM, which stands for read-only memory, is a computer file containing a copy of the data often extracted from a video game's memory chip. Many of them, while old, are still protected by copyright. I'm not going to get into the ins and outs of the legalities of gaming ROMs, partly because I'm not a lawyer, but mostly because I don't want to bore you to tears. So instead I'll point you in the direction of an article in the Magpie magazine, which is all about legal ROMs for RetroPie, including some of the places you can get them from. There's a link in the video description if you'd like to check it out. There are three main ways to get games into RetroPie, and the first one is to load them onto a USB stick. In order to do that, we first need to prepare the flash drive. In Windows you can do this using File Explorer. So make sure the USB stick's inserted into your computer, then right click on it and choose Format. From there the file system wants to be set to either FAT32 or exFAT. I'm going to set the allocation unit size to the default, and then give it the volume label USB. And with that done, click on Start. So this will wipe the contents of the USB stick, but as I'm fine with that, I'm going to click on OK to continue. And just like that, our quick format is complete. Next, click on the USB drive and we're going to right click and make a new folder called RetroPie, all lowercase. And with that done, I'm going to safely eject my USB stick. With RetroPie running on your Raspberry Pi, you need to plug the USB stick you just prepared into it. The green activity LED on the Pi should start flashing, so wait for this to finish. If that's not the case, just count to 30 and then remove the USB stick. If you then reconnect the USB stick to your computer and open File Explorer, now if we look inside that drive and back in the RetroPie folder, you can see we've got some subfolders. The one we're interested in is this one called ROMs, and in here you can see we've got all of these folders to represent the respective gaming systems. So all that's left to do is get some games. Once you've got your gaming ROMs, you'll most likely need to unzip some of them. Unfortunately, Windows itself doesn't give us a fast way to do this, and while unzipping a couple of files manually isn't too bad, if you had a large collection the process could quickly become tedious. So I'm going to get a program that will make this much easier for us. Open your web browser and do a search for 7-zip. It's this one we want, 7-zip.org. I'm going to download the 64-bit version and save that to my computer. Then I'll head back to downloads and install the program. Yes, I do want to do that, and click on install. And as quick as that, we're ready to go. Click on type to group the zip files together, then single click on the first zip file, hold down the shift key on your keyboard and single click on the last one. Right click on them and choose 7-zip extract to quotes star backslash quotes. And look at that, they're both extracted. If you right click on the highlighted zip files again, we can now delete them. Once you have the files ready to transfer, you need to copy and paste them into the relevant subfolders in the USB stick's ROMs directory. For this reason, it's a good idea to get your games for one platform at a time. That's why these two ROMs are both for the NES. I'm going to move File Explorer to one side of the screen. Then I'll open another File Explorer window and drag that over to the other side. If I open the USB stick's ROMs directory, I can copy and paste the games across. I'll get the Blade Buster ROM file and drag and drop that into the NES folder. Then I'll do the same for Alter Ego. Note, if there's a text file included, you could open this to see if there's any useful information about the game. If we take a peek inside the NES folder on the USB stick, we can see the copied games. And with that done, let's eject the USB stick. Okay, I'm now going to reconnect my USB stick to the Raspberry Pi. Once connected, the ROMs will automatically copy from the USB stick to the Pi's micro SD card. How long this will take obviously depends on the number of ROMs you're transferring and the size of them as well. For the games to appear, we need to restart RetroPie. So press the start button on your gamepad to get to the menu and then head down to quit. But this time, rather than restart the system, which would reboot the Raspberry Pi, we'll just restart Emulation Station, which is RetroPie's front end. So with that highlighted, press the A button on your gamepad to select it, and then press the A button again to restart. And look at that, we now have the NES. And as you can see, it tells us that our games are now available. Press the A button on your gamepad to take a closer look, and there's the two games that are just loaded. Once you've chosen one, as it tells us on the bottom bar, you could press the A button to launch it. But for now I'm going to press the B button to back out of there. The second way you can load games onto your Raspberry Pi is by using Samba. I'm going to do this from a Windows computer, but you could just as easily do it from Linux or a Mac. So the first thing we need to do is open our computer's file manager. Then click in the address bar and type //RetroPie and press enter. If this didn't work, instead of the name RetroPie, you can use the Raspberry Pi's IP address. So here we can see RetroPie's shared folders, and right now we want the ROMs one. If you just watch the transferring ROMs from a USB stick part of the video, this folder will no doubt look familiar. But the big difference this time is that these folders are on the micro SD card of our Raspberry Pi. So by adding games here, we're loading them directly into RetroPie. In fact, this is the location where the ROMs get copied to from the USB stick. And we can see that by looking inside the NES folder. There's the games I already copied across. Okay, so I've downloaded another game, this time for the Sega Mega Drive, or Genesis if you're in the US. This one's called Tanglewood, so I'm going to drag its ROM file over and drop it into the Mega Drive folder. With that done, I'll close the windows and head back over to RetroPie. Press the start button and head to quit, and then restart Emulation Station. And as if by magic, there's a Mega Drive entry with one game available. If we take a peek in there, there's the Tanglewood ROM I just loaded. Using Samba is my preferred way to get games onto RetroPie, as it cuts out the middleman, or in other words the USB stick. But just so you can't say I don't spoil you for choice, let's look at a third way. To set this up, we need to head into the RetroPie configuration menu and then select RasPie config. Use the cursor keys on your keyboard to highlight interface options and press enter to select it. Then do the same to choose SSH. Use the cursor keys again to highlight yes and press enter once more. Then press enter to select OK. And if you press the tab key on your keyboard twice, you can press enter to finish. Then I'm going to press the B button on my gamepad to return to the main screen. Back on my Windows PC, I'm going to open Settings and then head into Apps, and from there into Optional Features. I'm checking to see if the OpenSSH client is installed. If it's not, you can install it by adding a feature. Once that's done, come out of Settings and open the command prompt. And we're going to remotely connect to our Raspberry Pi using the SSH command. So type SSH space pi at retropie.local and then press enter. Because this is our first time connecting, we need to accept the Pi's fingerprint, so type yes and press enter again. And then enter the default password of lowercase raspberry. And congratulations, if you're seeing a screen like this one, you've SSH'd into your Raspberry Pi. Now this can be useful for all sorts of things, but the reason we're using it now is to change the Pi's default password, because as it tells us here, it's not currently very secure. Let's first clear the screen by typing the word clear, and then change the password by typing PASSWD. You need to enter the current password of Raspberry, and then enter your new password, and type it once again to confirm. And with that done, let's log out by typing the word exit. Right, so I'm going to close the command prompt and open a web browser. With SSH enabled in RetroPie and the password now more secure, we're going to use an SFTP or Secure File Transfer Protocol program to transfer our gaming ROMs from the PC to the Pi. There are multiple options available, but I'm going to go with FileZilla as it's both open source and cross-platform. It's this website, filezilla-project.org, and it's the FileZilla client that we want, not the server. So I'll download that for Windows and save it to my computer, and once you've got that you can close the web browser. Okay, let's open File Explorer, head into Downloads and install the program. And yes, I do want to do that. Agree to the license. I'll let anyone who uses this computer be able to use this program, and then stick with the defaults. I want to install it into my program files directory, so that's fine. And I'll keep the program's default name for my start menu. And that's it, I'll click Finish to run FileZilla. So to connect to our Raspberry Pi, type RetroPie into the host box, then enter Pi into the username. Type in your new Pi password that you just set in the command prompt, and the port is 22. When you've entered the connection information, click on Quick Connect. You can tick the box to always trust this host and then click OK. Once you're connected, you'll see the files on your Raspberry Pi on the right hand side of the screen and the files on the computer that you're sitting at on the left. So if I click on the little plus to expand my computer's home directory and then select the Downloads folder, I've already added a couple more games in here. We've now got Alien Arena and Car Polo. Notice that they're both zip files, but I haven't unzipped them. The reason for this is that they'll be running in an arcade emulator. which is designed to support the zip file format. Next we need to locate the directory we're going to put them into. So I'll expand the Raspberry Pi's home directory by clicking on the plus, and then have a look in RetroPie, and you can see down here that we've got the ROMs folder, so I'll double click on that. And I'm looking for the arcade directory, which is right here. So let's drag and drop those games across. Alien Arena and Car Polo. And with that done, we can close FileZilla. Then back in RetroPie we need to restart Emulation Station. So press the Start button, head down to Quit, restart Emulation Station, and yes. And just like that, we've now got 2 arcade games available. So let's press A on the gamepad to take a closer look, and there they are, ready to go. At the moment, although the games are loading nicely, they look a little boring. RetroPie has a built-in function known as scraping, which can help to rectify this. As you'll see shortly, scraping uses metadata from the internet to add additional information to a game. To get started, press the Start button on your gamepad, then press the A button on Scraper. Out of the box there are 2 online sources we can choose to scrape from, the GamesDB or Screensaver. I'm going to go with the GamesDB. I'll leave the scrape ratings turned on, and then select Scrape Now. For filter you can choose between Only Missing Image and All Games. As this is the first time scraping, this option won't make any difference, but on subsequent scrapes choosing Only Missing Image should be faster, as it will basically just look for games that you've added since the last time that you ran this. Systems refers to the gaming platforms we're running on RetroPie. In this case it's automatically selected 3, as it's smart enough to know that I currently have arcade games, NES games, and those for the Sega Mega Drive as well. If you don't want it to scrape all of your games, you could enter in here and deselect some of the platforms. I'm going to leave that alone. It's a good idea to leave User Decides on Conflicts turned on. This way, should any of the games produce conflicting results, you'll be able to choose the ones you want. Right, let's select Start. When it finds some information, you have 4 choices. You can press the A button on the highlighted game name to accept it. Use the D-pad to highlight input and press the A button to enter an alternative search name. Skip the entry altogether, or stop the entire scraping process. I'm going to select the acquired information. I'll press the A button again to do the same for Car Polo, and for Tanglewood as well. Then again for Alter Ego, and finally for Blade Buster. You can see once it's complete we get a summary of our scraping. I'll press the A button to OK that. If you weren't successful on getting the information on all of your gaming titles, you could try using a different scraper. But as I've got all of mine, I'm going to press the Start button on my gamepad to return to the home screen. So let's take a look at what we've just achieved. I'll start with the NES. Straight away you can see that we now have an image for the highlighted game. We also have some information including the release date and a description. If I move down to Blade Buster, it's a similar story. This time the description is so long that it actually scrolls. Let's take a quick look in Mega Drive. There's the Tanglewood info. And then lastly we have Arcade. And there are the 2 arcade games that I loaded earlier. What if the game you want to play doesn't seem to have an emulator in RetroPie? Well, that's when we need to install one. To do this, enter the RetroPie configuration menu. From there, head for RetroPie Setup. Press Enter on your keyboard to select OK. Then use the cursor keys and enter into Manage Packages. Which option you choose depends on the emulator you're after, but it will usually be either Manage Optional Packages or Manage Experimental Packages. There's a handy page on the RetroPie website entitled RetroPie Platform Support. This lists the available packages with a handy description of what they are. I'm after an emulator for the Nintendo DS, and if I scroll down to Experimental Packages, I can see that it's there. Note there may even be more than one emulator for a particular platform, so if one of them doesn't work very well, you could try installing another. So in RetroPie's Manage Experimental Packages section, I'm going to choose Drastic and install that from a pre-compiled binary. And yes, I'm sure I want to do that. Right, let's back out of there, and out of there, and also out of that one too. Then from here we can exit RetroPie setup. Returning to my PC, I'm now going to add the Nintendo DS game. Here it is, this one's called Anguna. I'm going to use Samba to copy it across. Use whatever method works best for you. And as you can see in the ROMs directory, since adding the Nintendo DS emulator, we now have an NDS folder. So I'll simply drag and drop that into there. And then I can close the windows. To finish the process, we need to return to RetroPie, open the main menu, and restart Emulation Station. And if I scroll along, there's my new Nintendo DS platform, complete with the Anguna game. If you're unsure what type of ROM files are required for different gaming platforms, you could do a lot worse than checking out the Systems in RetroPie page on RetroPie's website. Here you'll find a console image column along with the system name, release date, and perhaps most importantly the type of ROM extensions. Okay, the time has come to play some games, and to do that we first need to return to RetroPie. I'll start in Arcade, and let's have a look at Car Polo. Because this is the first time I'm launching one of the arcade games, it's asking me which emulator I would like to use as the default for running all arcade games. You can use the D-pad on your game controller to move up and down. I'm going to use the A button on my controller to select MAME 2003. So this probably wasn't the best game to start with, as it tells us there are known problems emulating it, and the driver is missing sound. But at least it's working in a fashion, and I can press the hotkey to start the game as it counts down from 15 seconds. The D-pad turns the little red car and the Y and the B buttons accelerate. You can press the right trigger to bring up the menu, and then if you select the input for the game, you get a list of the controls. That's enough of that. By the way, to exit out of a game, simultaneously press the hotkey and start button on your gamepad. Next, let's have a look at Alien Arena. If you get a game that rather than load returns to the menu, like Alien Arena has just done, most likely there's either something wrong with the ROM or it doesn't work on that particular emulator. Remember, I set arcade games to run by default using the MAME 2003 emulator on this system. But if a game isn't working, we can soon change that. So try running it again, but this time as it's loading, wait for the launch box to appear, then press a button on your gamepad. On my controller this is actually the A button, but apparently it's whatever button you have mapped to button 0 on controller 0. You can see there's a few things that we can change in here, but we're only really interested in option 1 or 2. If you were to choose option 1, you can change the default emulator for arcade games. It's currently set to MAME 2003 that I chose earlier, but perhaps a more useful option is number 2. By selecting this one, we can choose an emulator just for this particular game. So I'm going to change that to FB or Final Burn Neo. Then I'm going to press X on my keyboard to move down to launch and see if I can run it now. That looks a bit more like it, so let's exit out of that one as well. Right, so if we move along to the Mega Drive, I'm going to fire up Tanglewood. It looks as if this one's using the Genesis plus GX emulator. And straight away we get some audio, which is a good sign. So this is one of a growing number of new and original games built to run on a retro gaming system. And then off we go. Right, let's come out of that one. Let's look at the NES platform next. If we run Alter Ego, obviously we can launch straight into the game, but if we hold down the hotkey on our gamepad and press the X button, we can bring up the RetroArch quick menu. RetroArch is a front end for emulators, and its menus allow us to configure a plethora of settings. Indeed, you could produce an entire video on all of the options in here. I'll just go through a few of them. If you were to select Resume, that would obviously close the menu and take you back into the game. Restart is a useful one, as this would completely relaunch the game from the beginning. The state options are very useful. Saving a game's state will allow you to pick up where you left off, as the next time you run the game you can re-enter this menu and load the save state. State slot takes this even further. By choosing the slot to save the game's state to, you can create multiple save points. Further down the quick menu we have controls. When the game initially started, the gamepad was configured to a port number. In this case it was port 1. By entering into that port's controls, you can remap your controller's buttons should you wish to do so. To do this you would use the up and down buttons on the D-pad to highlight the entry you wish to change, and then the D-pad's left and right buttons to change it. I'm happy as they are, so I'm going to press the B button to back out of there. If you do make any changes, remember to save them. There are two ways to do this. Save Core Remap File would apply the changes to all games using RetroArch, whereas Save Game Remap File would apply the changes just to this particular game. Right, let's back out of there. If we back out of the quick menu, we get RetroArch's main menu. Among other things, in here you'll find settings. Things worth noting in here are drivers, where for example you can change those used for input, video and audio. Backing out of there we also have settings for video, audio and input. If you do make any changes, remember to return to the main menu and head into Configuration File to save them. The easiest way to do this is to save the current configuration, but if you don't want to do that you can save your changes as a new configuration. If you do this you'll then want to load them in Load Configuration. Right, let's return to RetroPie. Okay, let's have a quick look at Blade Buster. I'll press the start button to launch this one, and here we have a good old-fashioned shoot 'em up. And let's come out of there. Then the last game I loaded was Anguna for the Nintendo DS, so let's open that one. I'm going to press the B button to start a new game. This game was made for a handheld console, which is presumably why it doesn't fill the screen. Also, this emulator doesn't appear to use RetroArch, so the useful configuration menu is not available to us. That said, I found that moving the right analog stick to the right brings up an in-game menu, so you may want to have a go at configuring the controls in here. But I'm just going to exit out of the game. By the way, rather than going back to the main screen, you can flick between gaming platforms using the right and left buttons on your D-pad. There are also some useful shortcuts involving the hotkey on your gamepad that are listed on the screen. To back up RetroPie, we first need to shut down the Raspberry Pi, so go to the main menu and quit, and then shut down System. Next, eject the microSD card and then connect it to your PC. If it comes up with this message, ignore it. The last thing you want to do is format your microSD card. So let's cancel out of there. I'm going to open the web browser and search for Win32 Disk Imager and then get it from sourceforge.net. So let's click on download and save that to my computer. When you've got that, close your browser and head to File Explorer. If I open the downloads directory, I'm going to install the program. So we need to accept the license agreement and then click next a bunch of times and finally click on install. I don't want to view the README file, but I do want to launch the program. Make sure that the device letter is the same as the boot letter, in other words that of your microSD card. Then click on the little blue folder. We're going to make a backup image of RetroPie, so you first need to choose where to save it to. I'm going to put it in my documents directory. I'll give it the name RetroPie Backup and then click on Open. Then all that's left to do is click on Read. As you can see, this is going to take a little while, so I'll pause the video and come back when it's complete. And there we have it, a successful backup of RetroPie. And if we take a look in Documents, you can see the image file it's created. If you don't want to back up the entire system, the most important data is kept in the Samba shared folders. If nothing else, be sure to back these up, especially the ROMs directory if you don't want to lose all your games. A simple copy and paste to a different location should suffice. Should you later need to restore them, perform the same operation in reverse. A system image backup, or any other backup come to that, isn't much use if you can't restore it, so let's have a look at how to do that now. Make sure that you've connected your Raspberry Pi's micro SD card to your computer. While it doesn't really matter this time, you don't need to format it, so let's cancel out of there. Let's open up Win32 Disk Imager and click Yes to run the program. As with when we ran the backup, ensure that the device drive letter is that of the micro SD card's boot partition. Then click on the little blue folder. You need to navigate to where you saved your backup. If you don't see it, click on Disk Images and change it to star.star. Then select your backup and click Open. And from there we need to click on Write. And then on Yes to proceed. As with the backup, this will also take some time, so I'll pause the video again and come back when it's finished. Great, with that done, let's close the program and eject our micro SD card. Then pop it back in the Pi and power on. If you've restored RetroPie onto a larger micro SD card, you'll want to take advantage of that additional space. To do so, head into RetroPie's configuration menu, then into RasPi config. From here, use your keyboard to select advanced options, and then again for expand file system. And as it tells us, the root partition has been resized, and the file system will be enlarged upon the next reboot. So let's press enter to proceed. Then tap the tab key twice and press enter again to finish. And yes, we do want to reboot. And that's it, you can now use the full capacity of your new micro SD card. Next we're going to look at updating RetroPie. If you haven't already, it's a good idea to perform a backup before attempting this. So to get started, enter RetroPie's configuration and then select RetroPie Setup. Use the cursor keys on your keyboard to highlight Update and then press enter to select it. Then toggle over to Yes and press enter again. Now that it's got the latest version of the RetroPie setup script, we can press enter to run it. And then press enter again to continue. It's now asking if we'd like to update the underlying operating system packages, so let's do that as well. This will probably take a while, so I'll pause the video until it's done. And there we are, the installed packages have been updated, so select OK to finish. After updating RetroPie, I'd highly recommend you restart the system, so let's choose Perform a Reboot to do just that, and then Yes to confirm. At some point you may find that your gamepad stops working correctly, perhaps following an update for example. If this happens, don't panic, you just need to reset it. There are a couple of ways to do this. The easiest, assuming you can still navigate RetroPie's menus, is to open the main menu. This would usually be done by pressing the Start button on your gamepad. Unfortunately, this no longer functioned for me. However, I discovered that on my controller at least, strangely pressing the right trigger worked. Regardless of how you get there, if you can reach the main menu, you need to head to Configure Input, and then select Yes to proceed. As instructed, hold down a button on your device to configure it. You now just need to remap the buttons on your controller, the same as you did when first setting up RetroPie. The second way to reconfigure your controller is for when you can't navigate the menu at all. In this situation, press F4 on your keyboard to enter the terminal on RetroPie. We're going to enter a single command to launch RetroPie's setup menu, and that is sudo space / RetroPie with a capital R and a capital P - setup with a capital S / RetroPie _ setup.sh, and then press enter to run it. Use the cursor keys to highlight Manage Packages and press enter to select it. Then select Manage Core Packages and enter into Emulation Station. From there choose Configuration / Options and then select Clear/Reset Emulation Station Input Configuration. Note this will wipe all of your controller configurations if you're using more than one. So assuming you're happy to proceed, select Yes. With that done, I'm going to press Enter to continue, and then I'm going to press the Tab key to cancel out of there. Next I'll go back, then back again, and back once more, and now I can exit out of there. Back at the terminal prompt, we simply need to type emulation station, all one word, and press Enter to return to RetroPie's graphical user interface. From here it's simply a matter of following the on-screen instructions to configure our gamepad, like we've done before. What if you've had enough of playing games alone and have found a friend to share the fun? Well, then you'll need to add a second game controller. To do this, make sure you've connected the additional controller to one of your Raspberry Pi's USB ports, then use your original gamepad to enter the main menu. Select Configure Input and confirm that you want to do this. As you can see, there are now two gamepads detected, so switch over to your new controller and hold down one of its buttons. From here it's just a case of mapping the buttons as you did with the first controller. You could take your retro gaming with friends to the next level by setting up RetroArch's Netplay. This would allow you and your best buds to play games together when you're not even in the same place. Unfortunately, as there are quite a few requirements to get this up and running, doing this is beyond the scope of this video. But if you'd like to learn more about it, check out the Netplay page on RetroPie's website. If you're having sound problems in RetroPie, in other words there isn't any, there are a few places you should check. We'll begin with the easiest, so press the Start button on your gamepad to bring up the main menu, and open Sound Settings. With a bit of luck, all you need to do is use your D-pad to bring up the system volume. If this doesn't work, check that the audio card is set to default. Assuming you're using your HDMI cable to supply sound, you'll want to make sure that the audio device is set to HDMI, and then I'd suggest having OMX Player audio device set to both. Right, with that done, let's back out of there, and then close the main menu. If you've still got no sound, the next place to check is in RetroPie Configuration. Enter into the audio section. Again, assuming you're using HDMI for sound, use your D-pad if necessary to highlight HDMI 1 and then press the A button to select it, and then press the A button again to OK that. If you're still having problems, next head into RasPi Config. Hop over onto your keyboard and press the Enter key to select System Options. Then use the cursor keys to enter into audio. As I want audio output through HDMI, I'm going to press Enter on that. Then I'll press the Tab key twice to highlight Finish, and Enter to select it. If it's still not playing ball, next head into RetroPie Setup. You can do the following with a gamepad or a keyboard. I'm going to use my D-pad to highlight Configuration/Tools, and then press the A button on my controller to select it. Next I'll choose Audio Settings. If it's HDMI you require, make sure you select it. Then I'll press the A button again to OK that. From here I can highlight back using my D-pad, and press the A button to go back, and now I can simply exit. If after all that it still refuses to even squeak a single note, other than a good kick, which though tempting I don't really recommend, the final thing to try is a good old reboot. So pull up the main menu, head to Quit, and then restart the system. To change RetroPie's resolution we need to dive into the configuration. From there enter into RasPi Config, then into Display Options, and finally Resolution. By default RetroPie will use your monitor's preferred resolution, but if you're not happy with this, simply scroll down the list and pick another. I'm just going to cancel out of there and then return to RetroPie. If you'd like to add a Bluetooth device, say a controller or keyboard, you need to head into RetroPie's configuration. From there, select Bluetooth, and then choose Pair and Connect to Bluetooth device. Once RetroPie discovers your Bluetooth device, you need to select it. Then, as advised, you need to choose the security mode, starting with the first one. If there are no problems, it should return to the Bluetooth menu, and you can check it's connected by looking in the Show Paired and Connected Bluetooth Devices. Let's select OK to come out of there, and then I'm going to cancel out of that. It can be nice to take screenshots of your progress to share with your friends, or even better, record an in-game video. We'll start with screenshots as that's the easier option, and to do this I'm going to launch Alter Ego. So let's start the game and get to where we want to take the screenshot. When you're ready, hold down the hotkey on your gamepad and press the X button. Then simply navigate down to where it says Take Screenshot, and then press the A button on your controller. And as you can see, our screenshot is saved. So let's come out of there and go and find it. To do this we need to remotely connect to our Raspberry Pi, and to do that I'm using FileZilla. I'm going to expand the Raspberry Pi's home directory by clicking on the little plus, and then select the .config folder. From there move down and double click RetroArch, then scroll down and double click Screenshots. And there's my Alter Ego screenshot. So I'm going to drag and drop that across into my pictures directory. And then I'll go and find it. And let's have a look at the image. Now that we know how to take a screenshot, let's have a go at recording a video. The first thing we need to do is check the RetroArch settings. So from the main menu, head into Settings. You want to look in Drivers at the Record section and make sure that FFmpeg is selected. Once that's done you can back out of there, then back out again and quit out of RetroArch. Next we need to edit the RetroArch config file. So press F4 on your keyboard to enter the terminal and type nano space /opt /retropie /configs /all /retroarch.cfg. When you've done that, press enter on your keyboard, and as this is a pretty big file we're going to search for the line that we want. So hold down the control key on your keyboard and press W, and then type recording _output_directory. When you've done that, press enter and it should have taken you to the corresponding line. Now at the moment this line has a hash at the start of it. This is what's known as being commented out. In other words, it's currently ignored. We're going to press the backspace key on our keyboard twice to get rid of the hash. You can see that it's now changed colour, which means that it's active. This is going to tell RetroArch where we want to save our recorded videos. So use your cursor keys to move along to the end of the line and then add a space, and we're going to enter the recordings directory complete with its full file path, which is /opt /retropie /configs /all /retroarch /records. Once you've done that, we need to save the file, so press Ctrl X to exit and then type Y and press enter to save it. Great, let's relaunch RetroPie's GUI by typing emulation station and pressing enter. And now let's make a recording. So I'll fire up another game. We'll go with Blade Buster this time. Before I even start the game, I'll hold down the hotkey on my gamepad and press the X button. And if I use the D-pad to move down to start recording and then press the A button to begin. So this is now recording and I can start the game. So here we go. That's it. So once I've had enough, I can hold down the hotkey again and press the X button, and then I can press the A button again to stop the recording. And let's exit the game. And then back on my computer in FileZilla once again, I'm going to navigate to the Pi's home directory, then into .config, then into RetroArch, and then if I scroll down I'm going to go into Records. And there's the video recording of my game. So all that's left to do is drag that across and drop it in my videos folder. And then I can go and find it to have a look. Then double click to play it. I'm the last person to discourage anyone from having multiple Raspberry Pis dotted around the home. But what if there was a way to combine the functionality of some of them? Especially with the extra power on offer from the Pi 4. Obviously we've already got RetroPie up and running on this particular Pi. And since this is most likely already connected to your TV, how about we install Kodi on here as well? For those not familiar, Kodi is an extremely versatile media player, easily capable of fulfilling many of your multimedia needs. Music, movies, TV shows, photos, the list goes on. Now that I've hopefully convinced you as to why adding Kodi to your system is a good idea, let's look at how we do this. We'll start by heading into RetroPie's configuration, and then into RetroPie Setup. From there you want to enter Manage Packages, and then Manage Optional Packages. From there scroll down the list until you find Kodi, and then select that. We're going to install it from the pre-compiled binary, and choose Yes to do so. With that done, we'll back out of there, then back out of that one as well, and also out of there, and then we can exit this menu. Right, if we return to the home screen, we need to do a restart. Now you could just restart Emulation Station, but I'm going to restart the Raspberry Pi. Once it's rebooted, you should now have this new ports section, and if we enter into there, we can now launch Kodi. If your gamepad isn't working in Kodi, when you start pressing buttons this message will most likely appear. If not, use your keyboard to enter into the input settings to do this manually. So I'm going to use my keyboard to select Yes to configure my gamepad. Since I'm using an Xbox 360 type controller, I just need to configure this. If yours isn't listed, you can select Get More. So I'll use my keyboard to highlight the first button, and then I'll press Enter to start mapping the buttons. Work your way down the list, pressing each one in turn. Once you've mapped them all, you should now be able to use the D-pad on your controller to highlight OK and press the A button to select it. And that's it, you should now have a fully functional gamepad. To exit Kodi, select the power button, and then either power off the system to shut down the Raspberry Pi, or select Exit to return to RetroPie. They say that a change is as good as a rest. I'm not sure if I agree with that, but let's look at changing RetroPie's theme. To do this, we first need to choose an alternative theme. So head into RetroPie's configuration and select ES or Emulation Station themes. Before you install a new theme, you'll probably want to see what it looks like. You could visit RetroPie's website themes page, or alternatively what I'm going to do here is download the theme gallery. Once that's done, we can select View or Update Theme Gallery and then View Theme Gallery to take a look. Either wait for the themes to automatically display or press the A button on your controller to advance through them. You can see the name of the theme at the bottom left corner of the screen, and when you've seen enough you can press the X button to back out of there. Once you've decided which theme you'd like, select it from the list. So I've just installed Colour Pi. With that done, all that's left to do is activate it. So let's cancel out of there, press the Start button on my controller to bring up the main menu, and then enter into UI settings. Now if I head for Theme Set, I can change from the default Carbon theme to the new Colour Pi. I'll press the Start button on my controller to exit UI settings, and then we should see the new theme. Obviously you can easily change back to the default theme should you wish to do so. RetroPie has what's known as UI or User Interface modes. By default this will be set to full, in other words giving you full access to the system. But there may be times when you want to restrict access, such as when children are involved. And for this RetroPie has Kid mode. Youngsters don't really need to be editing system settings, and they'll also benefit from a more streamlined user interface. So let's look at how to set this up. Start by launching the main menu and venturing into UI settings. From here enter into UI mode and then select Kid. Having done that, I'm going to back out of there, and we need to make a note of this pattern. That's because we'll need to enter it when we want to unlock Kids mode and return to the full UI. So jot it down and choose Yes to proceed. And interestingly, we get this message that the selected mode has nothing to show. This is because in order for Kids mode to work, we need to tag the games that we want children to be able to play. It's a great way to ensure the safety of your little ones, as you'll have to manually approve each game. Don't worry, RetroPie will remember your choices, so you won't have to do this every time. Right, let's select OK to go through the process. First, return to the home screen, and then choose a game you want to allow. For demonstration purposes, I'm going to browse the NES section. Let's say I want to give the young uns access to Alter Ego. Make sure that the game's highlighted and press the select button on your controller. Then head down into Edit this game's metadata. Scroll down until you get to Kid Game, and then press the A button to toggle that to on. Then I'll save that and back out of there. Repeat this process for each game you want children to be able to play, and then return to UI settings. This time, if you select Kid mode and then back out of there, you should be able to proceed without any issues. And if we press the Start button to close the main menu, you can see now that we only have access to any games that we made available to kids. With that working, I'm going to input the special sequence on my gamepad to exit out of Kid mode. When you power on your Raspberry Pi and RetroPie starts up, it has what's known as a splash screen. Perhaps you're perfectly happy with the default, but for that extra bit of customization, how about replacing it with your own? To do this, first we need an image that will become our new splash screen. If I open File Explorer on my Windows PC and have a look in Pictures, it just so happens that I have a JPEG image in here called My Splash Screen. So I need to get that onto my Raspberry Pi. And to do this, I'll use Samba. So let's open another File Explorer window and put that on the right hand side of the screen. Then I'll type // in its address bar and then open Splash Screens. So all I need to do is drag and drop my splash screen image into RetroPie's Splash Screens folder. And then I can close the windows. Back on RetroPie, we're going to head into the configuration and then select Splash Screens. Next, select Choose Splash Screen and then own /extra splash screens. Finally, choose your custom splash screen. I've only got one, so that's nice and easy. And with that set, select OK, and then we can cancel out of there. Right, let's see what happens if we restart our Raspberry Pi. And look at that, our very own custom splash screen. If you later decide you want to change it back to the default, simply return to Splash Screens and select Use Default Splash Screen. OK that and cancel out of there. There is another way to interact with RetroPie. It's called RetroPie Manager. This is actually a web-based manager, which means you can access it through a web browser. Be aware it's an experimental package, so it's definitely worth backing things up first. Right, let's install it. So go to RetroPie Configuration and then to RetroPie Setup. Next we'll select Manage Packages and then dive into Manage Experimental Packages. You need to scroll down the list until you find RetroPie-Manager and then select that. Then choose Install from Source. And yes, we do want to do this. Once it's installed, we need to go into Configuration/Options and then select Enable RetroPie Manager on boot. This will ensure that it starts up automatically when you turn on your Raspberry Pi. OK that, and then cancel out of there. Go to Package Help and make a note of the reference address shown here. Then you can OK out of that, go back, back again, and back once more, and then we'll perform a reboot. Head over onto another computer while you give your Pi a moment to restart. Then we'll open a web browser and type in the IP address of our Raspberry Pi, followed by a colon and the port number 8000. When you've done that, press enter. And here we have RetroPie Manager. The options along the top bar are replicated here on the main page. Monitoring is a nice option, as at a glance this enables you to see how much demand is being placed on your Raspberry Pi, what temperature it's running at, and how much free storage space you have left. ROMs is another useful section. With RetroPie Manager installed, we can now add ROMs to our Raspberry Pi directly through the web browser. Looking in the NES folder, we can see the ROMs that I've already added. And if we wanted to add some more, we can either click in this box, or even easier, simply drag and drop them from our computer straight into the web browser. And that's the RetroPie Manager. As you build up your RetroPie collection, wouldn't it be nice if there was a way to quickly access your favourite games? Well, that's where the conveniently named favourites comes in. In order to use this, the first thing we need to do is turn it on. So open the main menu and go to Game Collection Settings. Next, we need to select Automatic Game Collections. Then if you highlight Favourites and press the A button on your controller to select it. With that done, we're going to back out of there, then back out of the Game Collection Settings as well. And if you press the B button on your gamepad, you can see that we now have this new Favourites section. But as you can also see, there's currently nothing in there. So let's start to remedy that. You need to locate any games you want to put into Favourites. Let's say I want Alien Arena in there. Make sure the game's highlighted and then press the Y button on your gamepad. You can see that it tells us it's been added to Favourites. Now let's choose another one. So this time I'll go with Alter Ego, and I'll press the Y button on that one as well. Okay, let's go find them in Favourites. Here are the games, and it even tells us which platform they belong to. Now let's say I want to remove a game from Favourites. Doing so would be as easy as pressing your gamepad's Y button, but there's also another way. If you were to press the hotkey instead, and then browse down to edit this game's metadata, there's all sorts of information related to this particular game. We could even rate it by pressing the A button repeatedly. But the entry we're interested in here is Favourite, and I'll press the A button to turn that off. If you do make any changes, remember to save them. And then let's close out of there. So Alter Ego is no more. Fear not, it's still available within the NES platform, just no longer in Favourites. Obviously it would have been much simpler just to press the Y button, but I wanted to take a closer look at accessing a game's information or metadata. RetroPie has a built-in file manager. To get to it, enter into the configuration menu, and from there head to File Manager. Use your keyboard to navigate the files and folders. Then along the bottom we have a list of actions assigned to the function keys. For example, tapping F1 opens Help. As you can see, this file manager is called Midnight Commander, an open source application that's been around since the 1990s. We can press F10 to quit out of there. You can press F2 to bring up a menu of extra options, or F10 again to exit that. The F9 key gives us access to the top menu. Then we can press Enter to open the highlighted option. The cursor keys allow us to switch between drop-down menus, and once again we can press F10 to exit. The file manager is split into two panes. This allows for two directories to be simultaneously viewed side by side, and you can press the Tab key to switch between them. Pressing Enter on a highlighted folder will allow you to view its content, and selecting / will return you to the parent directory. When you finish perusing RetroPie's file structure, pressing F10 will exit the file manager. When trying to assess how well your Pi is performing, it can be useful to display the frame rate of your games. To do this, we need to launch the game we want to test. So let's try Alter Ego. Press the hotkey and X to bring up RetroArch's quick menu, and then press the B button to go to the main menu. From there, head into Settings, and then into On-Screen Display. Go to On-Screen Notifications, and then highlight Display Frame Rate. Finally, press the A button to turn it on. And right away we have the FPS or frames per second displayed in the top right corner. Then press the B button to back out of there, back out of that one as well, and also out of that. Then return to the quick menu and resume the game. Let's press Start to begin. And now you can keep an eye on your in-game frame rate. Okay, let's quit out of there. You don't need to bother about turning the frame rate off. As we didn't save the configuration, simply relaunching the game will default back to the previous setting. RetroPie has a built-in screensaver function. By default this will dim the screen after a certain period of inactivity. But since that's not very exciting, let's have a look at how we can customize this. First, we're going to connect to RetroPie from another computer using SFTP. So open FileZilla and pop in the credentials for your Raspberry Pi. Once that's done, we're going to click Quick Connect and then expand the Raspberry Pi's home directory. Select .emulation station, then right click on the highlighted entry and select Create Directory. Then we're going to type slideshow/image and click on OK. If you expand the newly created slideshow folder, you'll see that it also has an image subdirectory. We're going to transfer some JPEG images into this new folder. I've got a couple in my computer's pictures folder all ready to go. So I'm going to hold down the control key and single click both of those and then drag and drop them into the image folder. And with that done, I can close FileZilla. Okay, if we hop over onto RetroPie, we're going to open the main menu and head on into UI settings. From there, select Screensaver settings and then Screensaver behavior. So as you can see, it's currently set on dim. We're going to change this to slideshow, and then let's head into slideshow screensaver settings. The custom image directory is where we just put our JPEGs. That's why we had to create the slideshow and image folders. Let's cancel out of there. So now we need to set use custom images to on, and if you want to, you can change the swap image after duration. Simply move the slider left or right to do so. With my settings set, I'm going to back out of there and back out of that one as well, and finally back out of UI settings. Right, let's close the main menu and have a look at our custom screensaver. We could just wait for it to start automatically, but as I'm sure we've all got better things to do than wait for that, let's press the select button on the gamepad to launch the screensaver now. And here's one of the JPEGs that I added. And there's the other. And we can press any button other than select to exit out of there. And that brings us to the end of this video. As we've discovered, there's certainly no shortage of things to configure in RetroPie. Even so, some games will always work better than others. That's just the nature of emulation. Nevertheless, I hope you now feel better prepared to tackle any issues that may arise. And most importantly, don't forget to have fun. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. And if you'd like to be notified when I post the next one, just click the bell icon. Thanks for watching, and until next time, take care.